Okay, got it. Share screen. Right, so as we were saying before, there is a ethics forum at UTech, and we were given the context over the whole semester. So remember the way we are, when you do well, there are many types of research projects. What we're preparing it to do, which is called an empirical research study, where you either take secondary data and analyze that data, or you collect primary data and you analyze that data. There are other kinds of research studies like systematic reviews and other things, and their opinion pieces. We're sticking to empirical studies. And in an empirical study, you are required to do an ethics application. But let's give the context. Before you do an ethics application, you must know what research is going to be about. So remember, we're following a 5-chapter model at UTech or in SCIT. Chapter 1 being the introduction, your concept note becoming your introduction. Chapter 2 being your review or literature review. Chapter 3 being the methods, which is everything from the research design, the population sampling, the whatever pilot or prototype you're going to do, if that applies, as well as any instruments you're going to use, if instruments are collected. All research projects are going to have one of those two in computing. They're either going to have instruments and or prototypes. And just to remind everybody, since I've realized that people seem to think that every single research in computing needs to have a survey, it definitely does not. That seems to be an error that people are understanding. Please remember, unless you have a specific question, to keep your speaker on mute. Right. And so then after you do chapter 3, typically at that point you fill out an ethics application form. The next step would be to actually conduct the research, which would either be collecting data, or if it's secondary data, analyzing that data. Whatever you're doing, you do something which you had proposed in the ethics form. You've gotten the approval from a committee, so you pause while you give out the ethics approval, and then you do whatever you say you're going to do. Excuse me, can you mute yourself, please? Yeah, then you do whatever you're going to do, and then finally you analyze that data in chapter 4, and then you present your conclusions and recommendations in chapter 5. So we had just looked at this briefly. I'm going to look at it again, maybe briefly, but I don't know if I could call it your final assignment. Your final assignment in the theory class is to fill out this for your group project. So the title of the project is the same title, if it's a good one that you had in your first assignment. And most of these things sort of is automatic. Usually it hasn't been submitted to another ethics form, and if it was, we would fill it out. The supervisor would be, like, if it was major project, the person, I guess in the context of your class, it would be a teacher. And this is if there are other people who are postgraduate, which you are not. And if it's undergraduate, you'd say yes, which you all are, and it would be all the names of the students, the estimated duration of the project, if it has funding, which wouldn't be usually, and normally there's usually no privacy laws in the case of projects we're doing, but if there were, you would have to put it in. And then you remember in the projects that we did, we all had a purpose. Purpose is the same as the aim. So you put the aim is the purpose. And the significance you wrote about. So that's so far. And basically this, let me just go through it a little bit slower than I did last time when I did it. So this is basically say, for the research that you're proposing, does it meet any of these criteria? Are the people, if there are people, because research projects don't have to have people, will any of them have any of these features? Typically in the research projects we're doing in computing, the answer is usually no. Usually there's nobody who has a mental impairment, nobody who's highly dependent. By the way, there's a big difference between somebody, say, with diabetes and heart disease and cancer, and somebody in neonatal, that's a little baby, premature baby, or somebody terminally ill. We usually don't recommend you do these kind of projects. But if you were, it would have to be yes, and you have to go to UTech General Committee, because there's two committees at UTech, a General Faculty Committee, and then there's an overall large committee. Okay, so is it for prisoners and other people who are captive? Is it with human tissues? Is it with specific cultural groups? I guess in Jamaica that would be our Tainos. Is it to do with assisted reproductive technology? That would hardly be in computing. Is it to do with epidemiology? That's to do with public health. So that wouldn't be us either, not usually. I mean, actually, you can actually combine, you can do data research, data science research, that's just looking at epidemiology, but typically not in our school. Human genetic research, even less likely. This could be actually be possible. So there are some security projects where they intend to do concealment in order to find something out. If that's going to be the case, the answer is yes. And then it needs to go to, it's higher risk, and there must be a defense, and there must be an explanation as to why you're proposing that to be the case. Why is it necessary for research to be done that way? As opposed to in a way that is obviously less problematic inherently. Is it a clinical trial? For those who don't know, that's just like typically like either pharmaceutical product or a surgery. Is there something else? Medical procedures where you're comparing a control group with a intervention, usually for a health intervention. Typically, we would be, if it's children under 18. So typically, the answer is no. And if it's children, you must say how many people and how you're going to get the informed consent of the adults and the assent of the children. And then this is the part where people don't tend to fill out very well. And this is the part we're going to, for this class, the grade is going to count. So this is where you must pay attention. Everybody with me? So pay attention right now. Where will the project be conducted? I don't understand where people, like for example, let's say you're doing a project. I don't know what project. Somebody tell me your project. Two people tell me your project, quickly. Quickly. And nobody wants to tell me their project? Nobody has a project we're talking about. Okay, let's say we're in the middle of the pandemic. So let's say somebody decided, because we don't have a lot of computerized hospital systems, that they wanted to have the wanted to be able to register for emergency care for both clinics and hospitals from home. So they could somehow manage to reduce the wait time. I didn't know how that would work. But the point is they're going to do some registration for clinics and hospitals and doctors' offices. That's what we're going to do. We're just doing some kind of online registration. And if you wrote the Jamaican healthcare system, that's not where it will be conducted. It specifically will be conducted in Kingston and St. Andrew in 3 clinics, and then you name the clinics. Or if it's going to be at KPH and 3 specific clinics, you're going to name the clinics. So this is actually specific. Everybody listening to me? So people just love to just put things as vague. When it says where the project, this actually means where exactly you intend to conduct the project. Good. So, I mean, this is just plain. If it's at a school, what school? Is it JC? Is it KC? Is it St. Andrew High School? Is it Campion? Is it Papine High School? Where is it being done? Is it, as people say, they're going to do something in computer organizations and they don't name one organization? We have no idea. So this is specific. What is the research design? No, this is a harder question. This is an easy question. What's the research design? This is now a matter of is it a longitudinal or cross-sectional study? And if it is, what type of longitudinal or cross-sectional study it is? So, like we have a lot of studies that are survey, like, online questionnaires. Sometimes we have case studies, for example, where you may go into maybe a software development company or organizing your computers to see how they're effectively using it to observe what's going on. That would be a case study. So by the way, a case study, for those who've forgotten, could be done in more than one organization. A case study doesn't mean one organization necessarily. Experiment, as you hopefully would remember, is where you have at least two groups that you're comparing. At least one experimental group and one control group that you look at over time. It's considered the gold standard of longitudinal studies, and the gold standard as in the best of the types of research designs that there are in the world. I mean, interestingly though, there was a Nobel Prize in economics recently for what is called natural experiments, which is not this type of experiment. So natural experiment could be under this, but I don't know how natural experiments can be used in computing, but perhaps that's a possibility. Ethnography is a qualitative project where you would be observing the people in their natural setting. Action research is like, I could have been doing action research in this class, trying some particular new type of teaching or a new type of something, and then reflecting what happens and writing whatever goes on. Correlational study, I'm collecting data to see if two or more variables essentially are linked using that particular statistical tool called correlation. And there could be others. The point is you're going to say what the research design is in a sentence that makes sense. I mean, sometimes people just put it and leave, but it actually needs to be clear. So when you put experiment, if it's not clear, that's really not enough. It sort of needs to be enough that somebody can understand what is going to be involved in the research. So even though this is concise, it's not supposed to be confusing. It's supposed to be clear. So let's continue. Describe the research methods. And so it is to supplement the research design now. We're going to now explain like what you're going to do so that this particular research design will actually collect data that will yield results that will answer your research questions. So we'll be doing questionnaires, interviews, observation, document reviews. And by the way, there are many other things you could be doing. You could be using computer data to analyze. There's a long list of things. So this is not supposed to be a comprehensive list. It's just a set of examples. And it says describe. It's not supposed to be just two words. Which participant groups will be used in this study? By the way, sometimes there are no participant groups. Most, maybe 90% of the projects in the class will have participant groups, as in people. And often it's more than one group. So if I said earlier, I was thinking of doing a project in health clinics. I saw the health clinics in Jamaica because of COVID. I think in my study, I would want to have the nurses and the patients at the very minimum. Probably I could even have the doctors too. But at very least, health professionals and patients. I don't know if I want to break down the health professionals into different types and, have the nurses different than administrators, different than physicians. I don't know, because we haven't really figured out what the study question is. But certainly, I have two participant groups. And I'm going to explain why. Why in my case? Because when the patients come in, they're going to see the nurses first, at least in my estimation. And so they're going to be the ones liaising with the patients who are registering, and the patients, because they're the ones who are at danger in the middle of COVID to be waiting long and to be at increased risk for COVID. I'm just giving a succinct description. How many potential participants will be approached to pursuing study? And this is where now you're going to say how. You're going to actually have a letter or a poster that you're going to use to recruit the people. Remember, in this context, a lot of everybody would be probably using an online recruitment method. So probably something that could be sent on WhatsApp or email would be suitable, depending on the nature of the project. So what would be suitable to attract teenagers is very different. What would be suitable to attract somebody who's in their midlife. Anyway, so we need to think about what's suitable. And then how much time, this varies, but typically it's somewhere between 1 day to 1 week. You don't tell them 1 hour. Do it now or else it's not suitable time to get people to participate. How many potential persons will be used? So you need to describe. We had already said what the population is, so we had, like in the example I gave, I had 2 participant groups. One was health professionals, or maybe just nurses, and the other group was patients. And then I'm going to talk about how I'm going to go from the numbers of people I have in both of those groups to the sampling. So maybe I'm going to use probability sampling, or maybe I'm going to use convenience sampling, but I need to explain why. Like, because see down here, it says the number and H, and up here in G, it says how many people. So how many people, if you want to be, like, you will either be using the rules of thumb that we talked about in the class, or you'll be using the like, if it's a probability sampling technique, you'll be using, what am I trying to say? You'll be using, there are actually calculators that can actually work out a good sampling size depending on the statistic that you are going to be using. When I say statistic, are you going to be using correlation, t-test, z values, whatever type? It gives you different numbers depending on the type of statistics you'll be using to do the analysis. Anyway, it's supposed to talk about each of these. So how many people, what's the rationale? Not just 5 people, why? I mean, even not just 1,000 people, because by the way, you can have too little and too much. And what is required? So you need to say, like in example I gave, but a lot of mistakes you've made here is that just say one thing. If I have 2 groups, we need to say um, nurses interviews, and what was my other group? Patients survey. Right? Patients will be asked to complete an online survey. Nurses will be interviewed at the health clinic during their breaks, before and after work, at their convenience, or something. I don't know. Something what you got to say, or maybe or it is, but as per their convenience. And then you need to say how the privacy of the person will be protected. You're not going to collect, most likely, the participant's name if it's not needed, whatever, phone numbers, email addresses. If those are not needed for the study, you will not collect those things. And then you're going to also say, like, that you would only allow persons who are in the research team to have access to the data. And then you're going to talk about ensuring proper management to reduce the likelihood of any hacking. That's what this is, data management. You're all in computing. I think everybody here can figure out to say, oh, sorry. Most people here would have not had any experience before, so that should typically be no. If it's not no, you would say when and where. And this is where you should actually indicate that you're going to use some specific statistical technique. Most students just only write, which is actually not best practice. Don't you just write graphs will be creative. You're really supposed to write that there will be descriptive statistics, as well as you're supposed to say what specific analytical, because you have research questions, and to answer research question, you actually need specific techniques. If you actually look at the question, usually there's some specific technique that's required. Well, I mean, to talk about this here without looking at any particular one, it's kind of difficult just in generic way. And then this is the last part that people, so you're supposed to sign this in a best case scenario. For this class, I don't think you need to sign, but for major project, you definitely need to sign. So here now, this is where students, I don't know why they fail to do this, as if it's not here. So just to give you the principle, this is just saying, in case something goes wrong, this is what we're going to do. Especially wrong from an ethical point of view. Remember, there's a possibility of something could wrong ethically. So this is saying that we're going to review what's happening with the project. So like the project will be reviewed weekly, monthly, something you're going to say that we'll be reviewing the project. You could say that you're going to report to your supervisor, to your whatever. It's just basically saying that the project will be reviewed to see if there's anything wrong. That's basically what this is saying. This is saying that in case something goes wrong, either to the people on the team, that's you guys, research staff, or to people in the study, you're going to do something. Generally speaking, there's only two types of things tend to go wrong. Uh, well, maybe three. It tends to be psychological harm and physical harm, but technically it could be other things too. So it could be, issues of privacy and confidentiality. The point is anything that is likely to go wrong in your project's case, you're supposed to write what is the plan in case something goes wrong. And it's not really hard in your case. When I say that, because we're in the context of UTech, so you would need to put things along the context of UTech. So if it's something that there could be some possibility of psychological harm, you would say you refer the people to the health center for counseling. Does that make sense? If you're going to say that there is some possibility of a privacy breach, then you need to have some plan that you're going to write down for that. Everybody here is either taking or supposed to take security, so you must be able to either look it up or ask somebody else. And then this is that you would report the adverse means negative, any negative effects to your supervisor and to other senior members of UTech. This is if things really go wrong, you need to stop it. And you would say why. And as a matter of principle, anybody in a project who wants to know what happened by just a summary report, you can give it to them. Which in the context of a pandemic, most likely would be by email or yeah, it would be, I guess it would be email or perhaps maybe social media like WhatsApp. Those are the two most likely. But I mean, aside from that, obviously there's a possibility of literally mailing it to them. But the point is, people, if they want the summarized results, not the detailed results, they should be able to get it without a problem. And that's that. So the only other thing with the ethics is just to show you that there is a letter to participants, which is part of the form. So the letter to participants has an address and a date. There, the person, my name is, I guess you guys will be a student, the conduct of your study and the title. And you say, yeah. So this is where you're supposed to actually put in what the study is about. And you put in details here. This is where you're actually supposed to put in like what the project is about. So here, that's when you're supposed to put in your name and where you are from in terms of UTech. You're supposed to tell us what the project is for, conducting a study that does X, Y, and Z. The purpose of the study is that. And then the other one is now what's called the informed consent. So the informed consent form. Sorry for so many forms. This is not me. This is how these things are done. Is another form that complements the letter to participants, which has similar things at the top. This is UTEX form, and it tells you just, the first part just tells you it's legal and ethical requirement, and then just you must fill in the aim of the study. Maybe have it already, that's the purpose. The potential benefits, hopefully you know the potential benefits. The data will be collected in particular months. And this is the standard, so you don't change this, and that's it. Just to let you know, that both for major project as well as when you submit that to the ethics committee, as well as when you really should submit this for the thing. You really should fill out. So I don't know why people don't fill out this. You should actually fill this out with the appropriate thing. And then let me just tell you one more thing, since this is preparing you for major project. So guys, if you have an online survey, the idea is that the letter and the informed consent, you can have like a shortened form that would have this information so that people could know what the project is about. They can decide not to read it, you know. Everybody can decide not to read it, but it's not because you didn't give them the information. But there are always weird people like me who actually want to know what the study is for. And I remember one time there was somebody doing a study at UTech, and something said they could call, and when I called and asked question, the lady actually told me I disqualified myself. So I told her, have a great day. I was actually very annoyed. But I actually asked her some real questions, and the lady told me I asked too much question. I'm sorry I called. In fact, I don't even know if I'm going to call anybody else again. But the point was, the aim of the study was not there clearly. So when I was pointing out to her, it was not clear, and I'm calling to find out. Later, I disqualified myself for asking so many questions. I was actually amazed. Anyway, but the point is, you're supposed to be able to tell people what the study is about. So, any questions or concerns about the ethics form? No concerns? No concerns as yet. All right. So it's either crystal clear or clear as mud, depending on where the person is coming from. So we're going to talk a little bit about understanding data analysis and common errors in research. So if you think about statistical inferences, basically they're the process of making guesses about what is really going on. Sorry. If you recall, way back in the beginning of the semester, either week 1 or 2, we talked about there are two approaches. There are two major philosophies about how the world really is. And in the natural sciences, there's a belief that like the world out there is how it is and that we discover it. And generally speaking, in the humanities, the idea is that reality is basically described and constructed by human beings. Anyway, when we talk about statistics, we're basically talking about using statistics to learn about the truth out there. So it's what is called the positivist theoretical idea. So since the truth is not directly observable, because you typically cannot take every single possible data set, you have to take a sample. That's typically in the real world. I mean, even the census across the world is never the entire population. So since the sample is not the entire thing, you need to make guesses about the whole population from the sample. And then here are the statistics how to do that. So we already know correlations tell us the degree to which variables are associated with each other, and there are different types of correlations, and these measure the amount of the extent to which one variable changes with another. So we already know correlations range from -1 to 1, and they can be negative, inverse, or inverse. And the strength of the relationship is told by the correlation. So correlation does not give you anything about non-linear relationships, and it only shows shadows, so to speak, of multi-dimensional relationships. So if it is positive, it means that when one thing goes up, the other thing goes up. Like maybe the more time you spend studying, the higher test score will be. That seems to be probably usually the case. Yes?
Are you sharing the screen?
Oh, I'm not sharing the screen. Oh, I forgot to share it this time. I guess I'm not this time. I guess I was sharing it before. Oh, it's just me and right. So I was showing this before. So right, so I was saying, sit here. Choose on the sample, they're not the same. You want to make guesses from the whole population. And well, we already know that correlations vary from -1 to 1. And I was here. So when correlation is positive, I give this example. Similarly, if you put less money in the bank, you're going to earn less interest. Another positive correlation from when one thing going down, the other thing goes down. If you eat exactly the same amount, the more you exercise, the less you will weigh. That is actually not always the case because there are lots of other factors. Those are actually called confounding factors, if you all don't know. In fact, we should stop right there. Is there anybody here who doesn't know what in the world I'm talking about when I say confounding factors? Because this is actually a very important concept in this class. I mean, in all research classes. Anybody need me to explain that? Yes, raise hand. Right. So just a general gist. When you're wanting to find out if two variables are related to each other, you can just measure them and then say, oh, whatever, we can do a correlation, or we can even do what's called a multi-regression analysis. And the thing about it is, even with a fancy multi-regression analysis, you can actually say that these two things are related and it's still not correct because you have not measured an important, what is called confounding variable. So if there is a variable that's very important to how the two variables are linked and you didn't measure it, then you can be off in coming to a conclusion that's not correct. So let's just go with this. Usually, the more you exercise, the less you do. But let's see, anybody here would know from experience, you may exercise more, and then you feel hungry, and then you eat more. So, in fact, you might eat so much more, you might weigh more. So this might be true, but it's only true if lots of other variables are not the case. Plus, there are other things too. So the thing is, for this to be the case, you need to be looking at, so a confounding variable is any other variable that's likely to affect what's happening. So if you even go with this, the more time you spend studying, the higher test score will be. Here, anybody can think of a confounding factor for this? That's why I actually thought of it here. The biggest one, come again?
Knowledge retention of an individual.
Yeah, man, but no, I wouldn't go there. Knowledge retention. Yeah, but I would say that any one particular person, the knowledge retention, the more time you spend studying, that wouldn't affect it. We didn't say that the more time you spend studying, you all would have equal test scores. This is for each person, the more time spent studying. So that doesn't take away from what this is saying. I know what takes away based on watching all of you. Come again?
No. How well you maintain your composure during tests or something like that?
Oh, well, that's one. I never thought of that one. So yeah, so like anxiety. So you could study a whole lot and then you're super anxious. So if you spend time studying but you're anxious during the test, the one I was thinking about, the more time, which is directly related, the more time you study, the more time you spend studying to a point, and then when you stop, then you have no sleep, it's going to reduce the test score. So I think that this is probably a U curve where the more time you spend studying, this is right before the exam, this is cramming. So the more time you spend cramming right before the exam, the higher test score will be. But at some point it goes down because people are getting less sleep until they literally, which I've seen, fall asleep in the exam room. I don't know if you've ever seen it. I've literally seen it. Not too often, but I've actually seen somebody have to lay their head down on the desk because they're that tired. And I see other people like booking. Anybody know what I'm talking about? No comment.
Yeah.
It's really not talking. I've seen it.
Definitely.
Huh?
Yeah, I'm saying yes. Yes, I can relate.
Right. Yeah, but I like the one, but anxiety too is a big one because some people's quite anxious. So even though they spend time studying, the anxiety is basically undoing the time spent studying. So they could even like learn a lot, but test score is not the same as knowledge. So this is not the higher knowledge, this is the higher test score. So the less time it takes to complete a test, the more you get wrong at this. Okay, if this is true, yes, this is a negative correlation. I'm not even sure this is true, but this is not about me trying to evaluate these points. So the strength of the correlation depends on how close these things are to the scatter plot. And so we have these numbers. And so if it's between 0.8 to 1, it's very strong, or if it's between 0.7, 0.6 to 0.8, it's strong, 0.4 to 0.6 moderate, 0.2 to 0.4 weak, 0 to 0.2 very weak or no relationship. And so what kind of relationship do we see here on this graph that's shown on the diagram? No takers? I will certainly see that it's a positive relationship.
What's a moderate?
So this looks like a moderate relationship. This one is a perfect linear relationship between X and Y. This one is a strong indirect relationship. This one is 0.0892, so they actually took it. So this is a strong positive relationship. And what is interesting, just to be interesting, they plotted it using different ways of putting the, like the X and Y bar, plotted it a little different. But you see, no matter how you plot it, you can see the closeness to the best fit line. And the thing about it, correlation doesn't show this kind of relationship. So even though there actually is a real relationship here between these two variables, the correlation is 0. So Pearson's correlation will say that this is no relationship between these two variables, even though there is a relationship. It's just not showing with a Pearson's correlation. So this is the way the correlation coefficient is computed, which we're not worrying about in this class. And this is showing a number of examples. Again, we're not worrying about in this lecture right now. So just want to remind everybody in the class that when you see that there's a correlation, it doesn't mean necessarily that those two variables are causal. Is there anybody who knows what that means? Or who don't, in fact, let me say it a different way. Is there anybody who doesn't know what that means? So let me go back to these examples right here. See, if you go to here, you see this, perhaps people are thinking that the more time you spend studying, that is causing the test scores, which, higher test scores maybe could, and maybe this definitely is causal. So just from logic, we know that the interest is directly related to how much money you have in the bank. So we already know that just based on our basic understanding of simple investment, which, yeah. And this now is complicated because if you spend any time listening to the experts on this is a little bit complicated to say, well, what's going on here. And the less time you complete a test, the more you'll get wrong. I would actually want to look at this carefully, because what I noticed, especially since COVID, is that the people who complete it really, really fast get more wrong. But then the people right after that, they tend to get the best marks. It's actually really interesting. So the people who are right at the beginning and the end, those are tend to be the ones with the most wrong. The people who just I think they give up. They're just giving the test because they don't know anything. And then there are some people at the end who are both even though I know I'm going to stay there and finish it, but then there's so much more who they don't know nothing and they're going to stay there in case it's going to come to them. I don't know. But the thing is, to say that this is necessarily the case, I don't know. I'm not sure, but is it causal? Is it causal or by chance? I don't know. I actually looked at it in general, but that's not the question. The question is, if you do a correlation, let me see. So if you do a correlation, is it necessarily the case that when we have two variables that have a high correlation, that is necessarily one thing causes the other? Nobody is, sorry, I stopped sharing the screen on purpose. On purpose, because I didn't look this up before, and now looking it up right now. Yeah. So maybe I should have shared the screen. Yeah, why not share the screen? That might have been good. I know they're whole heap, so let's just share a screen. This should be whole heap. So, that's why should we look at Wikipedia's correlation examples? Let's look at in statistics. Let's see, statistics show how to spurious correlation. Sorry, the word spurious just means something that's not correct. So let's see if we can find one. So number of astronauts, percentage of people wearing seatbelts in automobiles correlates with number of astronauts dying in spacecraft. Wow. So in the 80s, not that many people wore seatbelts and not that many astronauts died. And apparently, this is a correlation. And the seatbelts use went up. Is it going up? How is this correlating? Oh, and I see then it went, the seatbelt use went up and then the astronaut deaths went down. Oh dear. Right. So what do you think? Is this correlation? Sorry. I hope everybody in the class understands what causation means. Causation means that one thing leads to the other. Yes? That is so distant from what them are? The whole point is, not the point. The point is, if you do a statistical analysis, sometimes you do things that don't make no sense. Is that what you mean? Is distance? Okay, you want us to look for some more? Let's just look. Or even more under President Obama. Let's see what this is going to say. I have not looked at this one in my entire life. So what is this? So Fox News, not surprisingly, they don't like Obama. So what they said, there's a clear correlation between President Obama taking office and a rise in unemployment rate. Oh, is this exactly when did he take office now? Must have been January. Oh, must have been February. I don't even know when did they take office? Is January in the US? I think it's not in January.
Yes, Sam. The 20th of January.
Yeah. Oh, y'all know the date. Wow. What are you, a US citizen? You don't have to answer that.
Huh?
I said you don't have to answer. That was the whole point. But okay, the employment, but it did not being precise. And it didn't go up by that much. This is a very poor argument. Well, anyway, because it didn't go up by much, it went down first, and then it went up not by much. What kind of argument is this? I think Fox News need to come with a better argument. Meaning, if it went up by a whole lot, yeah, the average going up in that year, yeah, that needs a better example. I'm also just looking for a graphic example. The whole point is there actually are lots of examples, and clearly that one, sorry. Most of the examples are going to be ludicrous. That's the whole point. The whole point is correlations that are spurious, that are ludicrous, are kind of crazy. Yeah, I'm trying to look at for the, where is the examples? This. Okay, I don't know. So they have example here. The cost of higher education and the cost of living increase. Well, this is definitely true. So what has been happening both in Jamaica and in the US for certain is the cost of living is increasing and the cost of higher education. In fact, go to the US, the cost of higher education in the US has been crazily going up much more than their cost of living. You guys think that Jamaica have cost of higher education that is high? Nothing compared to cost of place like Harvard and Stanford and MIT. You guys are paying little or nothing for your higher education costs. But there is a relationship, but this doesn't mean that there's a causal relationship between the two. And in fact, if there's a causal one, why isn't higher education going up much more than the cost of living? Especially if you take the US. I'm not sure. We'll have to go and look at Jamaica to be a little bit more careful with it. But the point is, back to where I am. Yes, I'm still sharing screen from correspondence. So the whole point is, just because two things are linked by a correlation doesn't mean that one causes the other. And then not only that, if there even was a causal relationship, do we know the direction? And so the only way you can know with any level of certainty is essentially to do what is called a longitudinal study. And the only kind of longitudinal study you can have confidence with is in an experimental study. But you can have different levels of confidence in other kinds of longitudinal studies. So when we want to talk about levels of confidence, we want to talk about statistical significance. So what is the probability that the estimate that is produced by random chance, that there's no relationship between the two variables that we're talking about? So typically we use a significance level of alpha equal to 0.05, that's the convention. Some researchers use alpha equal to 0.01. So alpha equal to 0.05 means that there's a 5% chance that the results were generated randomly, as in, let me go back. Remember, when you do any project, so if you go back to this exact little thing here, this thing here is a sample. Any sample is not going to be for the entire population. So you can actually repeat the experiment or the research study again and again. If you did it 20 times, you're not going to get the exact same answer for that research project each time you do it. It's going to be similar if you have a well-designed study, but it won't be the same. And so because it won't be the same, if I go back to exactly where I was, yeah. So since it won't be the same, we're saying that results that we get, which is some particular statistic, there's actually a 5% chance that the results are wrong if there is a significance level of 0.05. If you have significance of 0.01, there is a 1% chance that the results are wrong. So clearly you want it to be as low as possible. And once you're using statistics, there's going to be no way that it's going to be a 0% chance of being wrong. That is basically why, I mean, it's actually even part of this whole thing when they're saying all these things about vaccines and the percentage, but they're talking about something called specificity and sensitivity, that there's a 90-something%. All of that is all about the statistical significance of the vaccine being efficacious. Anyway, let's leave this alone. So the whole thing is when you're doing correlations or any statistics, you want to see if you can differentiate which relationships or association between variables are actually worth talking about. So is there an impact of variable X on variable Y? Is there a direction? Is that due to cause? Can we forecast something? And because of all of this, something called ordinary least square regression is a useful option. So we can correlate anxiety and depression and see that there actually is a relationship. And we can say that there's actually a lot of variability. 49% of people, it's so even though there is a correlation, there's a lot of variability in the score. So there's no evidence that depression causes anxiety, and probably vice versa either. So the thing about it, you can look at correlations, but correlations don't lead to make statements about causation. If you want to use this example, if you wanted to know if somebody with depression, is it depression? Depression? No, patient anxiety. Yeah, no, depression. So if you want to know, you could take people with depression and then that don't have anxiety and measure them over time and see if they developed anxiety. Then you would see if depression tended to lead to anxiety. You know, so you could take the people with depression, those with anxiety, those without anxiety, tell them over a period of time, and then see if that leads to a comorbid depression. Anyway, it is now time for my next class. So I'm going to run away. Okay. Anybody has any question, you can ask it now. I'm going to stop my